When pop culture progress faces pushback from the regressive status quo, we call it a moral panic. And few moral panics are more intense, outrageous, and relevant than the controversy over queerness in children's media. As the fight against censorship continues in the realm of TV and streaming, a surprisingly old-school form of edutainment has become the most controversial issue of the day. Drag Queen Story Hour.
Moral decay.
A sickness of the mind.
Upsetting moral effect.
Ought to be a law against them.
And here we go.
What exactly is going to happen to a child at a drag queen story hour? Well, they're not going to hate queer people, probably. They're probably going to just see queer people and drag queens as people in their community, not a really big deal.
Why are conservatives so vehemently opposed to queer representation for kids? What are they afraid of exactly? Ask the people protesting at libraries around the country, and they'll likely talk about grooming, the false notion that LGBTQ plus activists are plotting to turn children gay for nefarious pedophilic purposes. It goes without saying that none of it is true, but the grooming panic of today has reached a fever pitch, and it largely centers around Drag Queen Story Hour. The art of drag means a lot of things to a lot of different people. To some, it's a playful exploration of gender. To others, it's a raunchy romp born out of queer nightlife and ballroom culture. For drag performer Deb Doe, it was an escape from their strict upbringing.
I came from a very traditional military Christian family, so a lot of times I kind of actually as a child seeked out what I now know as drag, because for me it was like a place to see something that I always wanted to do and that was accepted but wasn't accepted in my world.
Drag can be one person's experiment with expression or a performance art broadcast to millions on wildly successful reality shows. And yes, a G-rated version of drag can be fun and enriching children's entertainment. What it's not is grooming.
I think it's just an art form that celebrates authenticity, gender expression, gender expansiveness, going against what is always seen as societally acceptable. And I think that is why ultimately more conservative people feel threatened by it, because it really does open our minds to what is possible and what could be acceptable.
But as queer acceptance grew, so did drag, until it absolutely exploded into a worldwide phenomenon led by the smash hit RuPaul's Drag Race. Drag has become part of the larger culture, and as is usually the case when things go mainstream, some of the edges have been honed off to make it more palatable for everyone.
I think a lot of people look at drag as one thing when it's really more of a genre. It's like cinema, it's music. The idea of saying drag isn't for children is like saying music isn't for children. I can agree that there are certain types of drag and drag performances that are not for kids. But if I'm performing my drag at a bar for 21 and up, your kids shouldn't be there.
Think of it like professional wrestling, which has more in common with drag than you think. It started in carnival sideshows and bloody bingo halls before becoming the stadium-filling, Make-A-Wish granting, PG-rated family entertainment that it is today. And the same is happening with drag before our eyes, although unlike pro wrestling, the wider acceptance of drag has been met with fierce resistance, largely when it comes to kids. In 2015, queer author and activist Michelle T created Drag Queen Story Hour in an attempt to make activities at her local library more inclusive of the LGBTQ+ community.
I couldn't help but wonder, how could we queer this up a little bit and make it not just more fun for me, but I think maybe more fun for everybody. And I was like, we just need a drag queen reading these books and it would change everything.
The events in which drag performers read children's books and conduct fun learning activities for kids aged 3 to 11 quickly grew in popularity and spread to countries around the world.
For kids to be able to see that there's a future where you can create your own fantasy and persona and just life, rather than having to be this necessarily like everyone else, and seeing someone that is doing something that they would want to do could be the reason they are like still alive.
The success of Drag Queen Story Hour has made it an obvious target for fear-mongers on cable TV and 4chan conspiracy freaks. They accuse Drag Queen Story Hour of exposing kids to sexual themes and grooming them into questioning their sexual and gender identities. The controversies are used as cover for conservatives to wage war on queer and trans people.
There's always been people in the United States that would like queer people to crawl under a rock. The type of bills they've been putting forward these past years are really trying to legislate queer people out of existence.
I think a lot of times transness and drag are often kind of grouped together. I think that ultimately that's kind of why there's an attack on drag queens right now, is because it's ultimately a way to police trans people and how they dress and how they present. There's like over, I think, 500 bills that are attacking drag queens, trans people, queer youth. Drag is getting too big, and now people are trying to like put the flame out a little while also eradicating trans people.
Or the Kentucky General Assembly passing a sweeping anti-trans bill.
Record number of bills relating to health care, access to bathrooms, even drag performances have already been tabled this year in state legislatures.
These proponents of fierce individualism and small government are using the state legislatures they control to make gender-affirming healthcare illegal, among other attacks on LGBTQ+ rights. And when they're not busy banning books, they're also passing laws aimed at drag performances under the guise of, what else, protecting children, a phony cover we've seen all too often throughout history. It's getting bad out there. Far-right protesters are violently disrupting Drag Queen Story Hour events, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets really hurt. The grooming hysteria has escalated to a level most moral panics rarely reach.
This is the kind of thing that maybe, folks would have complained about with their neighbors. It's gone from something like that to having a posse of Proud Boys storm a library and actually do the thing of terrorizing the children.
Drag Queen Story Hour has become a proxy battle in a larger culture war that looms over life in the 2020s with little end in sight. And the aggressor's endgame is tragically obvious.
It's ultimately a way to police trans people from expressing themselves. Is actually like even, I think, a little bit more toxic and a little bit more important than the idea of drag. Drag is my life. I do it every day. But at the end of the day, if drag had the end, that would be awful, but eradicating trans people is worse.
Kids don't deserve to be part of this moral panic. They never have. Not when sleazy psychiatrists tried to ban their comics, not when self-righteous preachers condemned their favorite shows, not when corporate executives tried to put the kibosh on queer cartoons, and not when the person reading them the rainbow fish is serving looks. If you want to be a culture warrior and stand in the way of progress, that's your prerogative. But before you go attacking kids' media, just stop. And for heaven's sake, think of the children.